Welcome everyone, thank you for joining me in Mayco's virtual studio here for Teacher's Time Out. I'm Caitlin, for those of you who don't know me, and today we are going to be working on a fun little project here inspired by Willems. And it is a cute little frame for your favorite Mo doodle. I know that I have really enjoyed doodling with Mo during lunchtime this pandemic year now, and I hope you have too. And now you have something fun to do with your little doodles. Today we are going to be making this frame and then also glazing it. First we're going to start off with our clay and building the frame. Now I have already pre-rolled out a slab. If you don't have a slab roller, which I clearly did to roll out the slab, you can use something like rulers or blocks of wood that are of similar size to roll out a slab to an according height, like this. Something like that with a rolling pin. Or if you have a slab roller, that works too. You can roll out a slab real nice like this and have it ready to go. Now when you roll out a slab, a lot of people ask me how to keep your slab from warping. So there's a lot of things you can do to help not have your slab warp. The first thing that you should do is make sure when you first roll out your slab that you compress your slab on both sides. So what I'm going to do is I'm just taking a rib. I am having a metal rib in my hand right now, but you could definitely use another rib. You could also use a credit card that you don't mind getting clay on, maybe a hotel key, something like that. And I am just basically smoothing out the surface. But what this is doing is this is telling the clay, it's kind of conditioning the clay to be flat. It was once much more balled up than this, and we rolled it out and we stretched it out, and now we want it to stay that way. So we're saying, clay, stay like this, be flat. So we're just compressing the slab on both sides to make it flat. This will also get off any canvas texture if you were rolling out your slab on canvas or any other texture for that matter. All right, nicely compressed slab there. Now I am ready to cut my frame. Now I made a rectangular frame here. Your frame does not need to be rectangular. That's just what I made. Depending on what you plan on putting in your frame, you might want to consider what shape you're making, but I'm going to go ahead and make another rectangular frame. You're going to want to use something with a straight edge to help you cut nice straight lines if that's what you're going for with your frame. I'm just going to put a ruler down, and I'm going to be using a fettling knife. Now fettling knives are really nice to use, especially if you're using them in a classroom setting, because they will help you cut through clay. They can also help you in sculpting, smoothing out edges, etc. But they're also not super sharp, so you're not worried about any of that with your kiddos in your classroom. Put these to the side. So just cutting out my rectangle here. And you can make yours any size you would like, depending on what you plan on framing. Make mine is about 9 by 6, but you can do whatever you want there. Make my one line a little crooked. I'm gonna fix that. Good thing I have a ruler. All right, so I have my rectangle to start. Now, essential part of frame, you need an inside cutout as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I'm gonna give it at least an inch of a frame, and what I'm going to do instead of going ahead and cutting right away is I'm going to measure an inch in from each of my sides. I'm going to do 2 little hatch lines on one side, and then I'll just kind of line it up and lightly make my mark without cutting all the way through. And I'll continue to do that. So this way, when we're making our light marks, we'll make sure that we are cutting where we want to. And then we can just smooth out that mark again with our finger or a sponge. That will work. All right. So I have my lightly marked lines here. I can go ahead and extend any lines that are too short, and then I can smooth over any lines that are too long. And now go for the full cut by pushing all the way down. Smooth over that edge. Get my ruler in there. Support. If you don't have a fettling knife at home, you could use a butter knife. That would work too. It's gonna cut through your clay pretty well. There we have it. So now we have a frame. Simple as that. Now for my frame, I have added some geometric shapes on the outside edges, just to build a little design. There's some extra options with color later on when I glaze. You can add whatever you would like to your frame. I'm going to go ahead and cut out some geometric shapes. You can use a stencil for cutting out your shapes. You can just draw your shapes just like we did when we were lightly making our lines with our fettling knife, and cut them out that way. Or you can use a cookie cutter of sorts if you have one of those around, which I'm going to use here. I'll just cut out a few shapes to attach. So you could do whatever you want some stars, some circles, whatever. But when I cut something out, I'm always going to make sure that I smooth out my edges. Just dipping my finger in some water here, smoothing out the edges nicely so I don't have any rough spots. If you don't want to use your finger, you could also use a sponge. Kind of up to what you prefer there. Now you can add as many shapes as you would like to your frame. I'm just going to go with these three here. And I'm going to attach them right to the surface of my frame. Now to attach them, I'm going to be using the method called slipping and scoring. So you score first. Scoring is just making a bunch of little lines. You're basically roughing up the surface here. So I have it on the back of my shape that I'm attaching. And then I will also put it where I plan on attaching to my frame. So a bunch of little lines back and forth, kind of roughing up the surface. Now we're going to add some water. Now this is going to create a suction effect that's going to help the clay stick to each other. We're going to press down firmly. There you have it. I come in with my sponge, smooth out my connection edge. Sometimes it gets a little messy. Lift it up real quick. So, shape attached. Go ahead and add my other shapes in the same fashion. Rough up that edge. Get it wet. And press down firmly. Clean up there. All right. Now, like I said, you can add as many shapes as you want. You can be different shapes, different sizes, whatever you would like to add to your frame. Once you have all your shapes attached, there's one other key feature to our frame. We need to make sure that we have some holes that we would be able to tie our string to in the end. Now, to make these holes, a few options. You could use a straw. You could also use the back of a pencil. But basically what I'm going to do, decide what the top of my frame is. So we'll go here, top of frame. And we're going to make sure that they are holes, two holes that are evenly spaced from each other on the top of the frame. You're just going to take your straw and or pencil, just push firmly down, give it a little twist. With the straw, that'll cut right through and usually collect the clay right into the straw hole there. So you have a nice clean hole. If you're doing it with a pencil, I like to get my eraser side a little bit wet. Push right down in, give it a little twist. So now you've pushed all that clay down to the bottom there. You have a little bit of a hole. You might need to come back on the other side with your sharpened edge and clean it out a little bit. And you could even out the back of it as well if you got some clay stuck back behind there. And that's how we build our frame with clay. Now we have some options for glazing. Today we're going to be using stroke and coat. Stroke and coat can be put on greenware or bisqueware. So we could let this dry a bit just so it is not super wet anymore. I've added a lot of water here and attaching. So once we let it dry so it is leather hard, that means that you can still put your fingernail through it, but you're not going to bend it when you pick it up like this. Once we get to that point, you could add your stroke and coat to it and do what we would call a once fire. So we would fire it one time to cone 06, or we can take a bisque piece. So put this fire to cone 04 in a bisque kiln, have a nice bisque piece that we could then glaze. So either option. Today I'm going to be demoing on my bisque piece because this is still a little bit too wet, but you could once fire it if you would like. All right, so now we're ready to glaze here. I'm going to be glazing on my bisque piece here. So this was bisque to cone 04. And now it is ready to be glazed on. Always a good thing to do when you're starting to glaze on something that has been bisqued. Just wipe it off with a damp sponge real quick. That's going to remove any dust or debris that may have shown up during or after the firing process. And we don't want any of that to interfere with our fun surface designs that we're about to create. Don't do that. All right, so today we are using stroke and coats. I have 5 colors here. We are using Honeydew List is our green. We are using Yellow About It for our yellow. I have My Blue Heaven for my blue. Pinkaboo for my pink, and then all of my black lines are going to be done in tuxedo. So I'm just going to start by putting some colors down on my piece. I have a nice palette here to squirt all of my glaze out onto. I'm going to start with My Blue Heaven. Always give your glaze a good shake and pour it out onto your palette. I'm going to start by just putting my Blue Heaven here, the blue, on my base of my frame. I'm going to get my brush a little bit wet first. Not too wet, just wet enough so it is ready to grab some glaze for me. Get the glaze nice and on there. And we're going to go for it. So I'm using a nice soft fan brush to apply my glaze. And I am going to apply 3 coats total. So I have nice maximum opacity of color on there. It's gonna look kind of messy, but I promise it's not that messy. I started with the frame first because if I accidentally get any of this on any of the shapes, I can just go with my sponge and give it a little wipe off. Trying to keep my surface a little clean here. Now we want to have 3 coats total of our color on here. We're going to wait for each color to dry before adding our additional coat. So you're looking for it to not be shiny anymore. So you will see in some places you will see the shine on that glaze. As soon as the shine is off, it is ready to go for your second coat. But while we are waiting, I will start glazing my circle down here because I can multitask. So that's what we're gonna do. So I'll pour out some Pinkaboo. Get another brush ready. Square would be pink also. Alright, put that down. Looks like I'm ready to put more blue on my frame. Pink. Let's add our next color. A little bit of yellow. Nice. Now, one of my favorite things about stroke and coat is that The liquid color is very similar to the fired color, which is nice when you are designing something. I feel like especially in a classroom, when your students are designing something, it's sometimes hard for them to understand what a glazed piece is going to look like after it's fired. So with stroke and coat, that's really nice that they can design with the understanding of what it will look like at the end, because that color is so close. I think that is really helpful. Don't put your thumb in your wet glaze. That's what we learned. After you put your second coat on, you will notice that it'll take a little bit longer to get to that no shine dry. Because when you're first putting your glaze on your bisque, that bisque is ready to absorb all of the liquid in that glaze. But once you've already put one coat on, it has absorbed a lot already. So it's going to take longer. But it will still dry, I promise. Just have to wait. Last color, some green with our honey-do list here. Alright, so we're almost have all 3 coats on. Now when you're going into the edge, you might need a smaller brush, or maybe you have some smaller areas you need to get to. Anything that's nice and soft will do. I'm going to use a pointed round though for this. I'm just going to go into my edges a little bit while I'm waiting for the surface to dry. And just keep adding coats until you have 3 coats of all your colors. Once we have 3 coats of our colors on there, we are going to let this dry so we can get to the fun part, which is adding our doodles on. Alright, so now that we have our 3 coats of all of our colors on there, we let that dry, and we are going to work on transferring our doodles onto our frame. Now you can do this a few ways. You could just go ahead and lightly draw with your pencil on top of your glaze if you wanted to just sketch in your doodles without transferring them from your sketchbook. If you have some drawings that you're very proud of and you want to transfer them as they are in your sketchbook, we can do a fun and exciting tissue transfer method. Alright, so super fun and exciting tissue transfer method. We need some tissue paper. You don't need a lot, depending on what size your drawing is. That's all you need. What we're going to do is we're going to take one of our fun doodles that we have from Doodling with Mo every lunch break since last year. And we are going to just trace onto our tissue paper with a pencil at first So just laying your tissue paper right over top of your doodle, you'll be able to see through the tissue paper. And you can just go ahead and trace with your pencil. You're just going to trace over all of the lines so you have your drawing on the tissue. Right, so I have my pigeon here, one of my favorite characters from Mo's books. I'm going to put my sketchbook aside for now. We're going to go ahead and transfer little pigeon here onto our circle. And the way we're going to do that, very simple. We're just going to trace over again with a magic marker. Now you just need something that's going to bleed through the tissue paper onto this surface. The dried glaze is going to absorb enough that it will pull the bleeding ink onto itself. And you will be able to see your outline. All right. Whenever I'm transferring something, I always check, so make sure you hold your tissue paper in place just in case it didn't transfer. But good news, it did. You can pull that away. Now we have pigeon on our frame. So now we can use these lines here to use as a guide to where we are going to put our black. We're using tuxedo as our black. Give it a good shake. Put it out on our palette. And I am using a detail liner brush now. Whatever you are comfortable drawing with, brush-wise is fine. You just want something that's going to give you a thin enough line. And I'm just going to go ahead and line right over top of my Sharpie. Alrighty. Now, as I said before, 3 coats is going to give you maximum opacity. So you could go ahead once that coat dries, add another coat and then another one to that once that is dry. You can add additional doodles to your frame. I chose to put doodles just on a few shapes. You could put your doodles on any shape you want, or maybe directly onto the frame itself by transferring with the tissue, or just by drawing on with some pencil. Or you could freehand it with the brush if you'd like to, whatever you feel. Now, once we are totally done adding our doodles, we are going to go ahead, when our glaze is dry, put this into a kiln and fire it to cone 06, because we are using low fire clay and we are using stroke and coat on top of that. And then you will have a beautiful finished piece, which then all you need to do to perfect your frame is add your favorite string by tying a knot and tape in your favorite doodle. And then you can have your own little Mo Doodle art frame in your own home. Super fun. Now you can find this project and many other projects on Mayco's website, maycocolors.com. Thank you so much for joining me here today, and as always, make it Mayco.